Well, right now, it's my pleasure to introduce a gentleman that has been preserving our culture and our history through the art of storytelling. Would you please welcome at this time Mr. Tim Tingle?
Thank you. This is always an honoring time for we Choctaws, an honoring time for our families, and an honoring time for those of you who have chosen to be here with us this weekend. Yakoki, thank you. Thank you very much. We do appreciate it. The drum, those of you who are familiar with some native cultures, you recognize Cocopelli on the drum. He's from New Mexico, Arizona cultures. He's definitely not Choctaw. So we are also multi-ethnic on occasion. I have a good friend, and I want now to share a story that I'll blend with traditional stories also. But I had a good friend, Greg Rogers, and I know that Greg is here with us today in some form or fashion, but not the living form. I received a very unusual call from his mother this past February, 2 in the morning. Greg had already passed on a few days before Christmas. We had had his funeral service. It was a beautiful event. And his mother had gone to clear all of his things out. She called me at 2 o'clock in the morning, woke me up, and here's what his mother said. I found his ear. I found my son's ear. Aren't you happy? I said, yes, I'm so happy for you. You're going to need an explanation, aren't you? A little bit. Greg and I met 10 plus years ago. We were both writers, storytellers, so we traveled across Oklahoma often together. Sometimes long drives. Oklahoma Library scheduled me to do a talk in the Oklahoma Panhandle, and they didn't realize that I was also scheduled the next morning at 8 o'clock to talk at the Durant Public Library. They're a long way away. I was just about 80 miles from Colorado. I finished at 9 o'clock at night. I was supposed to start at 10 o'clock in the next morning in Durant, Oklahoma. A long way away. It's like a 9-hour drive. So I knew I would have to drive in the middle of the night. Greg lived at that time in Oklahoma City, which is about halfway. So I called Greg and he said, I'll get to bed early. You'll probably get here about 3 o'clock in the morning. Just call me before you get here and I'll drive the rest of the way. So I did. I called him about 2 in the morning. He woke up. I pulled into his driveway. He said, all right, I'm waking up, I guess. And I said, well, you're waking up, but you got some sleep. I haven't. He said, all right, scoot over, let me drive. And so he drove for about an hour, and we were coming close to Durant. There's a dam crossing a lake, Lake Texoma. And it's a long dam, and it's lit up, but as you cross the dam, it goes into the woods and takes a sharp turn and the lights are gone. And if it's 4:30 in the morning and both of you are driving half asleep, coffee's not doing any good. You've been drinking coffee, the caffeine's done its thing and gone away. So by now I was driving. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. We did cross that dam across the lake. We did look into the dark woods through the headlights and see where the road turned uphill to the left slightly. I must have nodded because the next thing I heard was, wake up, do you see it? If you think it made you jump, son, what about if you're at the wheel of a car and it's 4 o'clock in the morning and somebody is hollering and you look around and there's nothing but woods in front of you? Yeah, imagine that. So I did see it. About 100 feet in front of us, sitting in the middle of the road was a fox. Just sitting in the middle of the road, looking at us. And I said, where did that come? He said, from the woods. I just slowed down. And so I slowed down. And I know I'm not imagining this. The vision is too strong. The fox just seemed to kind of nod and leap over right into the path of an oncoming 18-wheeler that was spinning around at 60 or 70 miles an hour, assuming no one would be out driving that late at night. And it hit the fox. And she rolled to the side of the road. And of course, we were so wide awake. We were so wide awake. We took a deep breath and we said a little prayer for the fox that we knew had saved our lives. That fox stepped out in the center of the road to wake us up, to warn us, and gave its life for ours. That's what we knew. I drove on to Durant. I did the presentation, and on the way back to drop Greg off at his house, I kept looking as we approached the dam in Lake Texoma. I kept looking and looking. I wanted to see it, and there I did. I saw it lying in a ditch by the side of the road. I went and I picked the fox up, and I had an old Choctaw blanket, and I wrapped the blanket around the fox, and I put it in the back seat, and we drove the 3 hours, 3.5 to where Greg lived in Oklahoma City. And when we got out and I let him out, I thought to myself, that fox is too special. That fox is not going to ride in the back seat while I drive 8 hours to get to my home in Central Texas. So I stepped out and I picked the fox up. And Greg said, let me just take a look and just say a thanks. And I unrolled the blanket, set it on the grass next to his driveway, and he knelt down. We both put our hands on the fox. And at that moment, we both realized that the fox had been alive when we picked it up by the side of the road. It had died riding with us back to Oklahoma City. The way we had seen blood from cracked ribs, but there was no blood on the mouth or nostrils, as happens upon death. And sometime, as we drove and talked and sang quietly, it had spit the blood out and given up its life as we drove. And both of us knew we would never forget that fox as long as we lived. It allowed us to live. So when I took it home, I live right on Canyon Lake. I live on the side of a hill facing the Guadalupe River Canyon Lake. There's nothing between me and the lake but a giant oak tree, this huge old oak tree, bigger around than 2 men's arm spans. And that is the no-weep tree. I call it the no-weep tree. Every dog, every cat I've owned, even a pet goose that I've had for the last quarter of a century and plus, is buried with a special ceremony beneath a stone that I selected from the hillside, rolled over it, played my flute, sang Amazing Shalombish Holy Thapa, my Amazing Grace in Choctaw. And it's the no-weep tree because when I sit on my back deck and I stare down and I see the stones rolled around the base of that beautiful old oak tree on the side of the hill and the sun shimmering on the lake, I cannot weep. I do not allow myself to be sad at the loss of the animal. I allow myself only to smile at the joy that the animal brought to my life and I brought to his, hopefully, or hers. The dogs and the cats. It's the no-weep tree. And so many times I've looked at that no-weep tree and I've thought to myself, oh, if there were a no-weep tree for those family members we loved. So we would not weep upon thinking of them, but we would think about them with joy, with joy. And as I was just about to take the fox and lower it into the ground, and I'd picked a very special stone for it, it seemed to roll over by its own weight, and there were the eyes. And I picked the fox up, and I said a special prayer, and I did a little smoking, not this kind of, but this kind, with the sage stick. And I took out my grandfather's old pocket knife, and I said, forgive me if it's wrong, but I want to carry you with me. And I sliced the tail of the fox off. And I stopped the bleeding. and I wrapped it up. And every car I've ever owned, in the back of my car, rolled up in an old Choctaw small blanket, is the tail of the fox. To protect me as I drive, but also to remind me to never do anything so foolish as to drive 9 hours in the middle of the night after you've worked all day. So even though I have to call and maybe be late and maybe cancel something, I do it rather than risk a life. And I carry the tail of the fox with me everywhere I go. Not in my luggage. I'm afraid they might take it away from me at TSA. And as I was just about to lay the fox down, once more, the weight of it seemed to flip it up, and the fox looked at me, and I realized this is about Greg as well. Greg, who's learning to be a storyteller. Greg, who recalls and knows the importance of listening. And so I asked the permission of the fox, and I sang a little prayer, and I took my grandfather's pocket knife out, and I sliced the ear of the fox off, and I stopped the bleeding, and I put it in a little leather pouch. And I didn't say anything to Greg about it. I buried it, I rolled the stone, and now when I look down, I see another stone at the no weep tree. And the next time I was in Oklahoma, I gave Greg the fox's ear. And I told him what I was doing with the tail, and he said, I'll do the same thing with the ear. So whatever we do, we make no foolish mistakes in terms of driving and trying to be there and driving too fast and driving when we're sleepy. We'll be safe. We'll be safe when we travel. That's the word of the fox. Rather than drive all night from University of Illinois, where he received a writing fellowship and was writing a powerful Choctaw novel, Greg, who won Oklahoma Book Award with a Choctaw folk tale, rather than drive all night for a Christmas, he decided to stay home and get up early in the morning and grade papers. Morning never came for him. He placed his phone call and said, please come right away, I'm having heart problems. And morning never came. So 2 months later, following the service, I told her about the ear. She knew the story. Greg had already told her the story of the fox and how it gave its life for us. I told her about the ear. So now you know the meaning of the line. When 2 o'clock in the morning, last February a year ago, Greg Rogers' mother called me with excitement and said, I found my son's ear. I found it. I found the ear. It was the ear of the fox. It was the ear of the fox. We are here to honor the special ones among us that give us hope and faith and lead us. Chief Paul and our assistant chief also, Austin. We are also here to remember those that helped us come here, helped us have homes and cars, and helped us into our life. And though our life has troubles, we know nothing of the troubles before. My grandmother attended Tuscoma boarding school before it burned. Then she went to Goodland Indian boarding school. She was the only one at Goodland that had no parents to go home to. So during Christmas, they traded her from one teacher family to another. When she married my grandfather, they moved to Pasadena, Texas, to a little white frame house I still see clearly in my mind. For in that house, I received the worst whipping of my entire life. You will never forget the worst. I know, young man, you think a whipping is like a little pat on the behind. No. An old-fashioned whipping is something a lot stronger than a pat on the behind. Trust me on that one. And I got it from my Aunt Bobby. I had taken a chair and moved it close to the TV set, just like I always saw my grandmother do. And my grandmother came and fell over that chair. And here come my Aunt Bobby. She grabbed me. She whooped me all over that back porch. She said, don't ever move furniture where your grandmother's going to stumble over it. And I said, okay. And my grandmother came out and sat down and patted me on the knee, and she said, that's some kind of salty pie with your Aunt Bobby, isn't it, boy? I said, that's not funny. And then she said, let's go feed the chickens. So we went out and we fed the chickens, and she always had me grab the eggs and hold them over a light to see if they were bloody eggs, and if they were good, we'd gather them up. And then it was a few days. She said, that's some kind of salty pie, them chicken egg, boy. And then we were having breakfast, and my grandmother always came around and she poured coffee in the cups. But she had a habit of putting her thumb in the cup before she called the coffee in. And when she come to me, I didn't want some lady my grandmother putting a thumb in the cup, so I put my hand over the cup. And as soon as I did, everybody got real quiet. And here come my Aunt Bobby stomping around that table. She picked me up and took me out to the back porch and stopped right in the middle of mid-whoop. That almost never happens, does it, son? No. And I looked up at her and she said, you don't know, do you, boy? I said, I don't know, Aunt Bobby, I don't know. She said, you don't know why your mama sticks her thumb in the coffee. I said, I don't know, but I don't want it. She said, your mama's blind, son. That's why she sticks her thumb in the coffee cup. She blind, son. I was 8 years old and I didn't even know my grandmother was blind. She seemed to do everything, but she was blind. That night, sitting out with my uncle around the barbecue pit when everybody sat late, they'd cook a barbecue, sometimes cook it for hours for the next day. I asked him, I said, how come Mama blind? He said, you heard the story about when she first got to this house. Back in 1915, she stepped out on the front porch of her new home, ready to greet the sun and sing Shalom B'Sholi Topama. And kids in the neighborhood had heard from their folks they didn't want no Indian coming around, so they threw rocks and hit her in the face. She stumbled back inside the door and covered her hands, and my father was too. He ran up and saw squishing red from between her fingertips, and it looked like cherry pie to him, so he reached up to get a taste of it, put it to his lips. Salty pie, he said, salty pie. And that's where that term came from. Salty pie. My Uncle Kenneth said, it means you don't know where the bad come from, but it doesn't matter. You just got to move on. It might be salty pie, but you do the best you can with it. And then I got a call when I was a junior in college to hurry home. My grandmother was having an eye operation. So I drove all the way from where I was going to college back to my Houston hospital. It turned out she was having the first cornea transplant in the whole Gulf Coast area. And we were there for 4 days. And we told stories and we shared foods. And then the morning of the final day, the doctor stepped in, said, we'll know soon if she can see. My father followed him out in the hallway. And an hour later, my father came stepping in. He took his old welding cap off and he looked out at us and he said, no more salty pie. Mama can see. No more salty pie. Your grandmother can see. And my Aunt Bobby the next morning lined 32 of the grandkids up right next to her door so we could all go inside one at a time, and she was going to try to guess who we were because she'd never seen any of her own grandkids. And Aunt Bobby said, as you walk in, be sure to tiptoe when you walk, because if you walk in your regular walk, she will know who you are by the sound of your footfall. She will know who you are by the sound of your footfall. We all leave footfalls everywhere we go. And my hope and blessing for all of you and all of us is that we all leave footfalls of joy. Every room we enter, every step we take, every person that we know or don't know, make their lives better for having seen you. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.